In this section of notes, we're going to be talking about present tense verbs and present tense irregular verbs or boot verbs. And this starts on page 14 of your grammar packet. So to start with, let's quickly review our endings in the present tense for our AR verbs. Yo ends in O, tú, has, usted, él, ella, ha, nosotros, hamos, and ustedes, ellos, and ellas, han. Our endings for ER verbs are yo ends in O, tú, es, usted, él, ella, he, nosotros, hemos, ustedes, ellos, ellas, en. And our endings for IR verbs in the present tense, yo ends in O, tú, es, usted, él, ella, he, nosotros, hemos, ustedes, ellos, ellas, en. These look a lot like our ER verbs. The only difference is in the nosotros form. Okay, now we need to talk about boot verbs, and these are what we would also consider our irregular verbs in the present tense. So there are three types of boot verbs. We have boot verbs where the E changes to IE, boot verbs where the E changes to I, and boot verbs where the O changes to UE. So one thing to notice is that A, I, and U, those vowels don't change. And the only exception to that is going to be the verb jugar. So if you don't see an E or an O in the verb, you don't have to worry about it being a stem changer. AR and ER verbs can only change two ways. They can change E to IE, or they can change O to UE. AR verbs and ER verbs will never change from E to I, and there are no exceptions to this. So with these verbs, you only have two choices. IR verbs can change all three ways, E to IE, E to I, and O to UE. There's no trick to this, so you just have to memorize how the verbs change. Okay, let's take a look at three examples, one for each stem change. So let's start with an O to UE, and the verb is poder, to be able to. And we would conjugate it in the present tense. Yo puedo, tú puedes, usted, él, ella puede, nosotros podemos, ustedes, ellos, ellas pueden. Notice that in the nosotros form, I don't make that O to UE stem change. Cerrar, to close, is an E to IE stem changer in the present tense. And our forms would be yo cierro, tú cierras, usted, él, ella cierra, nosotros cerramos, ustedes, ellos, ellas cierran. And with this verb, just like poder, our nosotros form does not make the E to IE stem change. And our last example is pedir, to ask for, which is an E to I stem changing verb. So our forms in the present are yo pido, tú pides, usted, él, ella pide, nosotros pedimos, ustedes, ellos, ellas piden. And like the previous two examples, our nosotros form does not make the stem change. So the stem changing verbs that we just looked at are nicknamed boot verbs. And the reason that we nickname them boot verbs is because you can draw a boot around all of the forms of the verb that have the spelling change, which means that the nosotros form is going to be outside of the boot because it doesn't make that change. So if we go back up in our notes and we take a look at the verb poder, we draw the boot around the yo, tú, usted, él, ella, ustedes, ellos, ellas forms. because all of those change from O to UE. The nosotros form is outside of the boot because it doesn't make that O to UE change. So go back in your notes and draw a boot around all of the forms of poder that change from O to UE. Our second example was cerrar. So again, I can draw my boot around all of the forms that change. And the nosotros form in this again is on the outside of the boot because it doesn't make the E to IE change. So go back into your notes and draw a boot around the forms of cerrar that make the E to IE change. Our last example was the verb pedir. And just like the previous two, I can draw the boot around all of the forms where pedir changes from E to I, and then my nosotros form is outside of the boot because it does not make that change. So for your last example in your note, pedir, draw a boot around the forms that make the change. You have this chart in your notes as well, and these are some of the common verbs you're going to see this year with their meanings. These are going to show up in various units, but all of these are stem changing verbs. So we have to not only know how to conjugate them correctly, we also need to know what they mean. The next thing that we're going to talk about are our yo-go verbs, like tengo and hago. And these are on page 17 of your grammar packet. These verbs change to go in the yo form only. No other form is going to have the go in it. Some of these verbs can also have a double change, and they may change from E to IE or E to I. And there's no trick to know which ones do this, we just have to memorize them. All right, let's take a look at the verb decir, which means to say or to tell. This is a yo-go verb, but it's also an E to I stem changing verb, so it does two different things. So our forms of decir in the present tense are yo digo, tú dices, usted, él, ella dice, nosotros decimos, ustedes, ellos, ellas dicen. So notice two things. I only use the go in the yo form, and this is also a boot verb because my nosotros doesn't make the E to I change. Tener is also a yo-go verb, and it's also an E to IE stem changer, so it does two things as well. So our present tense forms of tener are yo tengo, tú tienes, usted, él, ella tiene, nosotros tenemos, ustedes, ellos, ellas tienen. So just like with decir, my yo form ends in go, and only my yo form. And my nosotros form doesn't change from E to IE because it would be outside of the boot. So also in your packet you have this chart of some of the common yo-go verbs that we're going to see this year. There are more of them, but these are going to be the important ones for us. I also have written in parentheses for you the ones that make that double change from E to I or E to IE. We have a couple of other verbs in the present tense that are really irregular. They don't follow the E to IE pattern or the yo-go pattern or anything like that. So they form their own category. And these verbs are on page 18 of your grammar packet. Our first verb that's really irregular is ir, which means to go. And my present tense forms are yo voy, tú vas, usted, él, ella va, nosotros vamos, ustedes, ellos, ellas van. Oír is another really irregular. It means to hear. And the yo form is yo oigo, tú oyes, usted, él, ella, oye. Nosotros oímos, with an accent on the I. Ustedes, ellos, ellas, oyen. Ver is our third really irregular verb, and it means to see. The yo form is veo. Tu ves. Usted, él, ella, ve. Nosotros vemos. Ustedes, ellos, ellas, ven. Really what makes this verb an irregular one is that the yo form adds an extra E in. The rest of them pretty much follow our pattern. And the last verb we're going to add to this category is the verb dar, which means to give. And we put this here because the yo form of dar is irregular. The other forms follow our normal pattern for conjugating verbs. So to conjugate dar in the present tense, it's yo doy, tú das, usted, él, ella, da, nosotros damos, ustedes, ellos, ellas, dan.